Tick-tock, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching all over the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood, and with me now is the mighty Tony Costa. Tony Costa, you actually have a background in multiple fields. If you had to pick one, like I would pick philosophy. If you had to pick one, what would it be? Would it be theology, or what's it going to be?
Yeah, it would probably be theology and grammar. I love Greek New Testament, the Hebrew Bible, Aramaic. I love the languages, but theology would be first. Probably the language would be second. And I love philosophy, Dave. I have to admit it. I love philosophy as well. So I'd say philosophy would be in the third category for sure.
Awesome. And for people who are new here, I'm assuming the people who are watching know why I'm interested in Islam. In case you are completely new, basically my best friend in college was a Muslim, and he spent years trying to show me that Islam is true. And the reason I was studying Islam was simply because my best friend was a Muslim. If he'd been a Buddhist, I would have been studying Buddhism. If he'd been Hindu, I'd have been studying Hinduism and so on. But he was a Muslim, so I was studying Islam, and Nabil eventually became a Christian. And I thought, cool, I'm done with Islam. And over time, due to multiple factors, I realized it's actually a really cool area to be involved in as far as apologetics and evangelism. And Tony, you've mentioned in a previous live stream that you were actually doing apologetics, dealing with Islam. Not only before most of the rest of us had any idea that was an important issue, but even before I was a Christian, if I recall. So before I became interested in any of this stuff, you were already in it. So why don't you give people a little quick background?
Yeah, I mean, I started looking at Islam around 1989, and to the early 90s. And my ministry was usually involved in apologetics. So anything apologetic, from the existence of God to comparative world religions to cults and so forth. And I got involved with Islam around 89, 1990, 91-ish. And it was around that time that I came across Shabir Ali. He had come to Toronto. I believe he was born in Guyana. He came to Toronto, Canada, and I started reading some of his tracts. So my ever first debate with anyone was actually with Shabir Ali in 1992 at the University of Toronto.
Hold on, your first debate ever was with Shabir Ali?
Correct,
wow.
In 1992. Yeah, in Toronto, at the University of Toronto. And then from there, we engaged in another debate in 93 on the Quran. Is the Quran the Word of God? And then we dealt with the crucifixion of Jesus, and then is the God of Islam the God of the Bible, and so forth and so on. So over the years, we developed a friendship. I count him as a friend, a brother in Adam. I want him to become a brother in Christ, but he's a brother in Adam. And so he and I both have great respect for each other. And we, through the years, have debated in various and sundry issues at various universities, online, on Unbelievable with Justin Brierley. We had a debate as well. So yeah, I've also debated others, as you know, David, some of those whom you know as well, and I've had debates with others. So I've been in Islam for, quite a bit. Not in Islam, but studying in Islam.
No, too late. You already admitted.
Yeah.
Do you renounce Islam?
I do.
All right, you're an apostate now. You're an apostate now.
I renounce Islam. Right. So, so I've been involved for about 30 years or so. And I've also taught in this area at seminaries. I don't know that many seminaries, David, that actually teaches on introducing Christians to Islam and how to witness to Muslims and so forth. So I'm glad that my seminary, this fall, I'm teaching a course on Islam, on Introduction to Islam. So I'm really happy for that. Unfortunately, a lot of seminaries maybe have one course on general apologetics, history of Western thought, but that's about it. So they're not really equipping Christians on how to defend their faith against Islam.
And I'd like you to comment a little more on that, because you just mentioned that it's rare to have Christian institutions teaching about Islam, and yet very common in the world of Islam for them to be trained in how to attack Christianity. And even among cults, it's built into them. It's built into them to raise certain criticism. And it's built into the religion of Islam because it's the Quran and the Hadith contain criticisms against Christianity. But even more than that, I mean, they are trained. They are trained to listen to people like Ahmed Deedat and Zakir Naik, and these are the questions that you can use to stump Christians. And then Christians just don't place any emphasis on it practically at all. And then, and so you're a Christian. You're going into an encounter. You have a Muslim friend. Well, guess what? That Muslim, he might not have been formally trained all his life, but he's been picking up tips on how to attack Christianity all his life. And the Christian has never been given one criticism of Islam in his entire life, as far as Christian institutions are concerned. So, what do you could talk about that problem all you want, but two, how would we go about doing something about that? Because I mean, one of the things we see, the vast majority of Muslim objections to Christianity and Muslim arguments are so easy if you just learn some basic facts, that if Christians would simply equip Christians, it would change the world, but we just don't do it. So what are your thoughts?
Well, when I was teaching Christians about how to share the gospel with Muslims and defend the gospel, I would first take them through how to witness to, but the main problem, David, is I place the fault at the feet of the church and pastors, because pastors are, I mean, they're wonderful pastors out there, but then when it comes to the defense of the faith, they really don't take this seriously enough. We should be having, cold case Christianity courses in our Sunday school. We should be teaching our young people about defending the gospel against Islam and against the cults and so forth. The problem is we're not doing enough in the defense department, and that is to our own detriment. So my passion for the past 30 years, David, has been to say we need to teach our people not only what they believe, why they believe, but give them handles and tools and on how to protect themselves and give a reasonable defense of the Christian faith. And so, because churches don't bother with this, we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of Muslims steamrolling over Christians. Mm-hmm. So we need to educate our people for sure.
Absolutely. And as I just mentioned, the vast majority of Muslim arguments are very easy to refute. And my goodness, Christians, if you realize the opportunity that we have right now, that Islam has been propped up on nothing but lies. Islam has been propped up on nothing but lies for the longest time, because Islam existed in the Muslim world where you can't challenge these lies or you'd get your head chopped off. But as Islam spread into other areas of the world, the people there didn't know anything about Islam. People don't study Islam there. So this allowed the Muslim preacher to come in and say pretty much whatever he wants about Islam, and no one is in a position to challenge it. If he sees that you love, you're in a society that appreciates science, Islam is a fount of science and learning. If they see that you like women's rights, well, guess what? Muhammad was a champion of women's rights. It doesn't matter what you like, they can adapt the message because everyone is in a state of ignorance and no one is in a position to correct the lies and the deception. All of a sudden, we get down to our time. 14 centuries later, we get down to our time. We have their sources. We have Islam's most trusted sources. Previous generations did not have that. And we have the technology to reach Muslims in countries around the world, even in countries where just 20 or 30 years ago, you couldn't have said any of this in the country because you'd get your head chopped off. But now you can say it right there through the internet. So we live in, there has never been a better time in all of history to witness to Muslims, to do apologetics dealing with Islam, to refute false claims of Islam, to defend Christianity against Islamic criticisms and so on. Never been a better time. This is the time. So if you ever wanted to study it and do it, then now is the time. And we're going to be looking at one of the main issues. If you wanted to learn one area to criticize and undermine a common lie in the world of Islam, it would be a bit of what we're going to be talking about now. What we're talking about now is what you might call the myth of perfect preservation. Tony, we've talked about this before, but we need to keep revisiting this, especially since we have some
Right.
updates. We have some updates from last week of the fallout from Mohammed Hijab's interview with Sheikh Yasser Qadi. It is epic and awesome. But Tony, what are Muslims told all their lives about the Quran, and is it accurate?
What they're told is that the Quran is that Muhammad received is the same Quran that has existed for 1400 years, and that it has been so perfectly preserved that not one vowel, not one consonant, not one word, nothing has changed at all. It's remained the same. So what they're basically arguing for is a perfect preservation of the Quran, and that is a common staple of all Islamic apologetics. And they've been saying this ever since they've made their inroads into the West. That is their primary argument. And it's done, David, for only one reason. It's to dismiss the Bible because they know there's textual variance in the biblical manuscript transmission. And so a lot of Muslims, because they assume that the West is completely ignorant about Islam, which it is for the most part, Westerners don't know about the textual variance that exists within the Quranic texts. And so a common staple of Islamic dawah is the Quran is a preserved text. It is has no variants, no changes, no deletions, no additions. Everything is the same as Muhammad received it. And so most Westerners, they don't have the apparatus to go and research this. They simply go, wow, that's amazing. Where do I sign up? So yeah, that's a common Islamic claim that they always make in trying to convert Westerners. Yeah.
And so basically, Muslims are taught all their lives that the Quran has been perfectly preserved right down to the letter. But in addition to that, they're taught to use this as an objection to the Bible. See, our Quran has been perfectly preserved miraculously right down to the letter, so that there's never been a difference anywhere in the history of the entire Islamic text. Unlike the Bible, where you Christians acknowledge that there are different manuscripts and you acknowledge that there are textual variants. And you can walk into any Christian bookstore and find a book on manuscript differences, that this manuscript will say something different. Now, they completely misinterpret that. They think we have different Bibles that are saying all these things, whereas, the vast majority of textual variants are things like spelling differences and things like that, and that don't affect the meaning. It's simultaneously, one, this props up their own faith, and two, it allows them to attack Christianity when their claim is completely false, right? So once you destroy that false claim and show them, no, you've got all sorts of variants in the history of the text of the Quran, then they can no longer claim, if they want to, one, they can no longer claim that as miraculous preservation. But two, once they understand that, hey, anytime you have humans copying a book, unless you believe in ongoing miracles, which supposedly, I would assume that most Muslims wouldn't believe in ongoing miracles if every time someone sits down to write something down to the Quran, like Allah or an angel miraculously steps in to make sure everyone gets everything correct. You would assume they don't believe that, but they apparently believe something like that anyone who sits down to copy the Quran is going to be divinely guided to get every single letter right. But anyway, unless you believe something like that, then you should acknowledge that human beings copying text can make mistakes, and it's perfectly normal, and that's why you need a field like textual criticism to examine the manuscripts, so that when one person copying a text makes a mistake, you can spot it because it doesn't line up with the other manuscripts. Now, a comment that's completely unrelated to anything. But we see your necklace there, Tony. And Mike AD said, "Is Tony's necklace Catholic? What is that? Is that a Masonic symbol? What is that? Does that mean anything?"
No, it's not a Masonic symbol. It's an ancient Christian symbol. It's called the Chi Rho. It's the first two Greek letters in the word Christ. It's from the word Christos in Greek, and it's the Chi is the X and the P is the R. And so it's an early Christian symbols. Early Christians used it. Some think this was the symbol that Constantine saw when he was told to conquer in that sign. And the circle represents the infinity. It means Jesus Christ is the eternal one. So no, it's not a Roman Catholic symbol. It's an ancient Christian symbol.
All right, now there's a comment here from John Makudo who says, please, who can show me where I can see the verse that says those that memorize the Quran died during battle? I'm going to post a link right now, John. The actual source for that is Ibn Abi Dawud's Kitab al-Masahif. So he's the son of the great hadith scholar Abu Dawud, and he put together basically an entire book on differences in different versions of the Quran, and he includes this. Unfortunately, that the Kitab al-Masahif is not available in English yet. I've been told that if I can bankroll the project, people can translate the entire thing, and then we would have it publicly available in English, an entire book on differences in the Quran. It's amazing that you could have an entire book of Quran differences for a book that has never had a single change. I mean, if the Muslim story is correct, the book should only be one page and it should be blank, but it's not. Interesting stuff. John, I'm posting a link right now to a link on my my blog, Answering Muslims, and it's a link to the Quran page, but you can get a bunch of passages and references if you simply if you cut and paste that actual passage. It should take you to a place where you can see where it's coming from in the Kitab al-Masahif if you want to take a closer look. All right, Tony, why don't you tell us what's been going on recently in the world of Muslim apologists talking about the Quran.
Yeah, well, people like Dr. or Sheikh Yasser Qadi and Dr. Shabir Ali have been talking about the fact that there are differences in the Quran. Yasser Qadi just recently, in the last video we're together, David, before we started having internet difficulties, Yasser Qadi said this: the standard narrative, that is the standard narrative of the perfectly preserved Quran, has holes in it. That's a direct quote. The standard narrative has holes in it.
Holes in the narrative?
Holes in the narrative. That's right.
I thought about putting together a song with that as the chorus. Holes in the narrative. There are holes in the narrative, right? And then Prophet Muhammad jumps on there and he's rapping about what to do, and then Uthman has to burn everything, and then Hijab has to chop the video.
Sounds like a good rap video, yeah. And so Shabir Ali came on and said the same thing. He said the same thing, that there were differences, and it was so bad that Uthman had to standardize the text of the Quran. So this would have been their version of the authorized version, I suppose. And so Uthman had to standardize the Quran and destroy all other Qurans. And so the problem, of course, with that is that they're finally admitting openly what you and I, David, and many others have been saying for decades, and that is that the Quran does contain textual variants, and that it is not a homogeneous text. That there are J. Smith and Hatun Tash have, I think, counted 37 different Qurans with different readings and so forth. So basically, these big intellectuals, Sheikh Qadi and Dr. Ali, are finally coming out, and they've been pinned against the wall, obviously. Western scholarship and the internet and so forth, and videos like yours, David, you've been exposing this for a long time. They're now at the point where they have to admit that, yes, there are textual variants in the Quran, but none of these variants affect any Islamic doctrines or Islamic practice, which sounds really, really familiar, David, because we've been saying Christians have been saying for at least 400 years, yes, there are variants in the Bible, but these variants don't affect any cardinal teachings of the Christian faith or Christian practice. And so we're now at the same point where we began. In other words, they're finally admitting what we've always said.
Yeah, and sorry, Muslims, it's too late, right? Because you guys said, our book's been perfectly preserved right down to the letter, and your book has textual variants. And we said, yeah, but those textual variants don't affect our doctrines in any way. They don't affect any core Christian doctrine. They don't affect any core Christian practice. And your response was, too bad. If it were really the word of God, God would have miraculously preserved it down to the letter so that there's no difference anywhere in any manuscript. He clearly didn't do that, and therefore your book has been corrupted. It cannot be trusted. So that was your definition of corruption. Any variant, any difference, that was the Islamic definition of corruption. And now you've got Muslim scholars acknowledging, nope, there are differences all over the place. We have completely different Qurans. Now, when I say completely different, I mean they are, in different parts of the world. They do not use the same Quran. Yes, a ton of the stuff will be the same in those Qurans, but it is not the same Quran. It's a total, utter myth. And Tony, one of the interesting things that happened in the discussion between Yasser Qadi, I got to make a video on this. The discussion between Yasser Qadi and what's his name, Mohammed Hijab.
Yeah.
Yasser Qadi is just clearly crushing the soul of Mohammed Hijab with all these questions. And in the end, it was absolutely hilarious. In the end, Mohammed Hijab tried to fall back to this position that we hear from Muslims all the time, namely that the power of memorization ensures that Muslims would be able to preserve the Quran. And so what he said was, look, if I gave you a blank Musaf, could you write down what the Quran of Muhammad was? And Qadi couldn't say yes. He couldn't say yes.
Yeah, he said, "Don't ask me that question.
Yeah.
Don't ask me that question."
And then Qadi was saying things like, "Look, if you want to talk about it afterwards when we're not live anymore, then I can tell you. But I can't tell you here. Now think about this.
Or take my class."
Yeah, and now think about this. If the standard Islamic narrative, which he acknowledged had holes in it, if that were true, he would simply say, "Of course I could put it down." Any Muslim could. Any Muslim who's memorized the Quran could write down exactly what the Quran is. He wouldn't say that. Why? Because there are holes in the narrative, my friends. Holes in the narratives. Matter of fact, people were bringing this up before we even got into it. So here's Abdur Rahman, who says, "What do you think about the recent Yasser Qadi debacle about ahruf and kirat of the Quran during his interview with Mohammed Hijab?" We think, as far as that interview, I had all the respect in the world for Yasser Qadi for acknowledging these things. Same thing with Shabir Ali. I obviously don't like his explanations of it. Shabir's explanations, I see some problems there. But as far as them trying to introduce the popular Muslim world to the fact that there is not simply one Quran, you got to respect them, because they're going to get blasted for it, and they are. Yep. And you wonder if they're gonna break when they're blasted. And unfortunately, Yasser Qadi already has, as we're going to see. So should we go ahead and recap the Yasser Qadi video?
Sure.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, and here. Oh, by the way, this is a side note. Tony, do you Canadians know do you in Canada, have you heard of the Streisand effect? Have you heard of that thing?
No.
Okay, well, that's cool. Then I get
Streisand?
to it's
Streisand.
Yeah, it's called the Streisand effect. It's named after Barbara Streisand.
I was just going to ask, is it related to Barbara Streisand?
Yep. Okay, so everyone, you'll want. Matter of fact, I need to make a video about it just for this purpose of using it here. There's what's called the Streisand effect. It goes back to the early 2000s when someone was taking pictures of the coast of California to show coastal erosion and so on. And apparently posted a picture of Barbara Streisand's house on the coast of California and mentioned that this is Barbara Streisand's house. And so Barbara Streisand flipped out about this. You can't be, you're sharing my personal information here. You're telling people, you're not giving the address or anything, but you showed them a picture of my house so that, if they were ever in the area, they would know that's my house. So Barbara Streisand flipped out about it and sued the dude. Right? Sued the dude. So somehow it spread in the news that Barbara Streisand suing people for posting a picture of her house, but then it became a big story and everyone started looking into it, and then everyone is looking at the pictures. Now, here's what happened. On the website, it was a small website, there were only 6 downloads of the picture. 2 of them were from Barbara Streisand's lawyers. So notice, only 4 people actually downloaded this picture. Right, because it's a site where you download pictures of various things, and only 4 people downloaded the picture of Barbara Streisand's house. As soon as it became a big issue in the media, Then all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of people started going to the website and looking at Barbara Streisand's house, right? And what happened was she eventually, the case was thrown out of court. The judge is like, "What are you talking about? The person can take, that's public, right? He's out on the water taking pictures of the coast. You can't tell him he can't take a picture. Suddenly he can't take a picture when he gets to your house. It's ridiculous." So they threw it out, and she had to pay like $150,000 in that guy's court costs. But what happened was, so what's called the Streisand effect now is basically you take something that isn't going to be a huge issue and there aren't going to be a ton of people who become interested in it. But if they hear that someone is trying to suppress information, trying to hide information, suddenly people go, "Wait, what's going on over there? What are they trying to keep from me? What are they trying to cover up? What are they trying to hide?" And so the idea is that in the course of trying to cover up information, you do the opposite, and now way more people become interested in it. And that's what I thought of the interview with Yasser Qadhi that Islam Critiqued posted a short clip. That's what we're going to be watching. We're going to be watching sort of highlights that Islam Critique posted of this like hour and 45-minute live stream discussion. But I wasn't gonna watch it. Islam Critique posted a little bit, and I was thinking, okay, so Qadhi admitted a few things and so on. And I wasn't going to watch it. I was going to, mention it, play that little clip and so on. So people, Qadhi can be another example of someone who's actually admitting some interesting things. But then when Mohammed Hijab deleted that part, right, because there was a backlash, Muslims started coming, "He's shaking our faith. What are you doing? Yasser Qadhi is destroying our faith in the perfectly preserved Quran." So then Mohammed Hijab cuts out half an hour of footage so that it stops destroying the faith of Muslims. And soon as people hear that, they're like, "What? Wait, you're deleting footage?" And then Abdullah Samir, who's an ex-Muslim atheist, he posted a video going through why Mohammed Hijab is deleting footage and so on. And so now it's kind of a big, big issue, and everyone wants to see what Qadhi said. Everyone wants to see what Qadhi said now. And the vast majority of people who want to see what Qadhi said are people who would never have been interested in that if there hadn't been an attempt to cover up and conceal what he said. Now, Tony, I think this is kind of similar to the way Islam has treated evidence about the Quran all along. Do you see any parallels here?
Yeah. It's called I guess it's the Uthman effect or the Uthman syndrome. It's the Uthman syndrome because that's what Uthman did. He destroyed all the other competing versions of the Quran in his time. And of course, Al-Hajjaj did the same thing in his day. And then, of course, 1924, the Hafs edition of the Quran was published in Cairo, Egypt in 1924. And they got all the other Qurans and they just flooded them in the Nile River. So what is it? Well, see, Christians are different, David. With Jews and Christians, when we discover a little credit card sized manuscript, I mean, we feel like we've discovered plutonium. I mean, there is jubilation. There's like, wow, we found, P52, Papyrus 52 at the John Rylands Library in Manchester. And we find Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus, or the Bede Papyrus. When we find these little pieces of papyrus, we want to go back. We want to go to the oldest documents that we have. And you'll notice with Islam, David, it's very much like the cults. They try to go away from their past. They try to move away from the ancient early documents. Why? Well, what do they have to hide? But the one thing I've always noticed about Christian textual criticism is that scholars like Daniel Wallace and others, we want to go back to the earliest documents. We want something that goes right back to Jesus. And so why are Muslims so afraid to look at Qurans that came from Ibn Masud, Ubay bin Ka'b, the companions of the Prophet? Why are they afraid to go back to these early documents? Well, I think that you know what the answer is, David. They're afraid to go back there because they know that there are variants. And that's what you see, for example, in the Sana manuscript that was discovered back in the early 1970s with the palimpsest manuscript that we saw. We discussed this last week. But anyway, that's the reason why they don't want to look at these things, because they are afraid that the myth of perfect preservation is going to be blown. And it has. The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, and for anyone who didn't see it, I posted a video a little earlier about how difficult it is, how long it takes to get Muslim apologists to admit simple facts from their religion. I posted a video about Yasser Qadi admitting that Muhammad married Aisha when she was a little girl, and Shabir still denying this. But Yasser Qadi simply calls people who deny it liars. He says, "Stop lying about this." But notice, for 30 years we've been saying, "Hey, your prophet had sex with a 9-year-old girl. What's up with that?" And it came up largely in response to one of the main Muslim arguments back then was the argument from Muhammad's great moral character. He's so great, he must be a prophet. And we said, okay, well, why do you have sex with a 9-year-old girl? And the response for the longest time was, nope, she wasn't 9, she was 19 or 18 or something like that. She was much, 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 much older. And so we had to just keep, for decades, throwing their sources in their faces. Why? Source after source after source after source. She's 9, she's 9, she's 9, she's 9, she's 9. And we keep putting these in their faces. Finally, it's becoming far more common among Muslim apologists to admit that she's 9, but to say that she had reached puberty, which also isn't true, but at least, still making progress. But I see a parallel there in that Muslims make a claim that is made in defense of their religion. So Muhammad is the greatest man who ever lived. His character is impeccable. The Quran's been perfectly preserved. They just exaggerate all these things in their religion, make all these absurd claims. And then we start going to their sources to show them that's complete nonsense. And they start massively reinterpreting their own sources, and they just start cranking out lie after lie after lie after lie to justify the lie, the original lie that they told. And so you notice the parallel here where for decades, Muslims are saying, nope, she was 19 or 18 or so on. And now you've got Muslim apologists saying, okay, stop lying about this. We can't keep lying about this. But then you have this parallel with the Quran that for decades, we've been going to their sources, showing them what's in their sources, showing them that the Quran has changed over and over and over and over and over again. They always deny it. And now you've got a crack. Now you've got a little crack forming. And you got Yasser Qadi and Shabir Ali saying, no, we got some problems here, guys. We got some problems here. Mm-hmm. And then there's a backlash against them from Muslims because Muslims think these guys are evil when they're the ones who are trying to ease the Muslim community into the truth. They're trying to let the Muslim community down as gently as possible. But man, there's no falling gently on this one, right? Your leaders have been lying to you your entire lives. And that's just got to hurt once you start realizing it. Any thoughts on this stuff, Tony?
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I mean, once you get cracks in the foundation, it's just a matter of time before, you get flooding, the edifice begins to crack and collapse eventually. So the cracks in the foundations, and what happens with cracks, David, they always get bigger and bigger and bigger until the building collapses. So that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the beginning of the tremors have already occurred. We're beginning to see the cracks in the foundation, and it's going to be interesting. And I'm thankful to God, David, that I've lived to see this day when people like Shabir Ali would come out and basically admit what we've always been saying. And so I think the years ahead are going to be very interesting in Islamic apologetics. Remember what Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And so there is division in the house of Islam. So much for the unity of the Ummah. We keep hearing about there's so much unity in the Ummah. But no, it is a divided house. And it's going to divide and break down for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's starting to look pretty bad. All right, should we go ahead and review?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we're going to watch. This is from Islam Critiqued, ladies and gentlemen. So if you go over to Islam Critiqued's channel, you can get this video, a few highlights from the discussion with Yasser Qadi. And there's really, really some awesome stuff in here. So we'll probably watch about half of it. I think it's like a 3.5 minute video. We'll probably watch half of it and then discuss a little bit. And then we'll watch the next half of it.
Every single student of knowledge knows, who studies Ulum al-Quran, that the most difficult topics are ahruf and qira'at. And the concept of ahruf and the reality of ahruf and the relationship of the Uthmanic Mus'haf with the ahruf and the preservation of the ahruf. Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 7? And the relationship of the qira'at to the ahruf. This is a topic that when you're the beginning student of knowledge, you're like, what is all of this going on here? When you go a little bit more, you learn to simply memorize what your teachers say and regurgitate it out. And you don't fully comprehend. When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. And this isn't new. This is from the time of the Sahaba. This is not a joke, brothers and sisters. The issue of ahruf and qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay. Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes, فَدَخَلْ فِي نَفْسِي شَكْ. Like, what is all of this stuff? Again, this is you were asking some very honest questions. It's the first time I'm saying these things. Many people are aware.
Actually, I wanted to pause it there. Over some of those amazing admissions that notice, according to Yasser Qadi, this issue of the Qiraat and the Ahruf, so the Qiraat, these sort of modes, these modes of recitation and so on, and the Ahruf, which Muslims can't even agree on what in the world this stuff means. They'll say, "Oh, it talks about dialects," and if they're challenged on it, they can't even defend that claim. But here you have Yasser Qadi admitting that this is difficult stuff, and he's saying it's a problem. And guess what? It shouldn't be. If there's only one Quran, perfectly preserved down to the letter, then every Quran should line up. There should be no problem anywhere. The history of the Quran should be perfectly well understood. And there should be no problem. And he's saying that there are problems. I want to draw attention to these things because we're going to see, unfortunately and sadly, we're going to see that Yasser Qadi is trying to backpedal now. So we want to be very clear on what he's acknowledging. What do you think about these clips so far? We've got more to watch on these clips, but.
Yeah, no, he's definitely acknowledging the issues. And if you notice, he said that even Ubay bin Ka'b, who we said was the master of the Quran. And remember, as you know, David, Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran, learn from four of them. And he listed Ubay bin Ka'b and Ibn Masud and others. And Ubay bin Ka'b was the master of the Quran, the master reciter of the Quran. And you'll notice how Muhammad Hijab brings up this tradition of how Ubay bin Ka'b was struggling even with doubt about the Quran. So think about that. Even one of the companions of Muhammad was struggling with doubt about the Quran and its transmission and those who've memorized it and so forth. But notice how Qadi says this is no joke, brothers and sisters.
No joke.
So he's very, very serious about this, and therefore he understands how serious this is. But the jig is up, David. He knows that there's only so long you can keep perpetuating this myth. There are serious issues, and I'm glad to hear Qadi say that. So,
yeah, and the other important point, he packed a lot into that first minute or so right there. But the other thing he said is, Muslims, the Muslims at the sort of, he considers it the lowest stage. But there's a stage beyond. There's a stage much lower than that, which I think is much more common. Is the stage where they haven't heard of Qiraat and Ahruf. They haven't heard of any of this stuff. They have no idea what anyone's talking about. They've only heard one Quran perfectly preserved, no difference anywhere. That's what they've heard, and that's what I hear from the vast majority of Muslims. So I think he's talking about once you start your initiation into reality. When you first hear of the Ahruf and the Qiraat and so on, you're just going, what is this? What is all this? This doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't it make sense? Because you've been told one Quran, perfect preservation. What is all this stuff about, different modes and so on? What are you talking about here? So he says, at the beginning stage, you're wondering what's going on. Then if you dig a little deeper, you start just simply regurgitating what your leaders tell you. Tell you. So they'll say, the Ahruf, those are just different dialects. And here's why the Quran needed to be revealed in these different dialects and so on. And he says, but then you keep digging and you find out we have got a problem here. There is a problem. We've got a problem. There are holes in the narrative. And what in the world are we going to do about this? And as you'll see, as he continues to go on, he believes that discussion needs to be kept away from the Muslim community. He believes that Muslims need to be kept hidden from that conversation about clarifying the different versions of the Quran, the different modes of recitation, the Ahruf and the Qiraat and so on. And so, wow.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
Sorry, David. I was just going to say that. This whole Ahruf, the 7 readings of the Quran and so forth, Well, why would Uthman have to, number one, destroy all the other manuscripts, and number two, what's the point of standardizing a text that has always been memorized?
Mm-hmm.
What's the point of standardizing a text if it has always been homogeneous? That is, it's always been the same. So the whole ahruf argument, I think, is just a save face approach that Muslims take to the problem here. It doesn't explain why you have to standardize the text, and it doesn't explain why Uthman ordered the destruction of all other copies of the Quran, to the point that Ibn Masud refused to hand his mushaf over. And that's why I think, David, Dr. Kadi is admitting that this narrative has holes. Is that, look, it's not just this whole kirat and ahruf. These things are complicated issues. You can't just say, oh, well, it's just seven different dialects and, off you go. There's nothing to see here. No, I think Kadi is recognizing that explanation does not hold water. It doesn't answer the questions.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, with it's almost parallel to the Streisand effect there. What he's saying, right? It's almost parallel to the Streisand effect in that he's telling Muslims, hey, there's this discussion at the scholarly level where we know that the story that we tell you guys is false, but we can't let you in on that discussion. So just understand that you're being told a lot of nonsense that scholars know is false, but we can't let you in on the secrets. And it's like, what? Now,
David, how long have you known that your Bibles have the longer ending of Mark is questionable, or the Comma Johannium, 1 John 5:7, the Father, the Word, the Holy Ghost, these three are one.
Since before I was a Christian.
Yeah, Christians have never hidden this. I mean, way back to Erasmus and even before with Jerome in the Latin Vulgate, Christians have always been open and honest about, there's a question about this passage, or there's a question about, the longer ending of Mark, or the woman caught in adultery. And when Muslims talk about this, it's like, wow, did you Christians know that the woman caught in adultery is not found in the earliest copies of John? And we're like, yeah, we knew that. Mm-hmm. What's up, Doc? Mm-hmm. There's nothing new here under the sun. But if Christians started hiding things, mm-hmm. like they keep accusing Constantine of destroying 80 Gospels, the
total nonsense.
Or that the Vatican or the Vatican has been hiding this, or the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden by the Vatican. I mean, the only one I see hiding things, David, are the Muslim scholars. They're the ones who are hiding things from their people. So Muslims, you got to ask yourself this question. If your scholars, the ulema, the scholars of Islam, are hiding things from you, you wouldn't trust a car salesman if he was hiding things about the car that had an accident history or something like that. You wouldn't trust someone on that. Why would you trust your eternity, your souls, on your Muslim scholars who are really hiding evidence from you? That is so unethical on a high level.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would only take one time. I mean, if I caught someone in a big, nasty lie, lying to me about my religion, I would say, okay, now you may be telling me other things that are true, but you may be telling me other things that are false. So from now on, anything you tell me, I have to investigate for myself, because I know that I cannot trust you because you've lied to me. They would only have to tell one lie for me to be thinking along those lines. But for some reason, in the Muslim community, their Muslim apologists can tell them for years, yes, Aisha was 18 years old when Muhammad had sex with her, or 19. Who knows? She could have been 50. We don't know, right? They've been telling them this nonsense for years, and now they admit, okay, she was 9 years old. How do Muslims not jump up there and say, whoa, why have you been telling me she's 18 or 19 for the past 2 decades? Why have you been telling me that, right? And here you have, they've been told perfect preservation right down to the letter from the time the Quran was revealed to Muhammad. And now you've got Shabir Ali and Yasser Qadi admitting that there are different Qurans in different parts of the world, that there are, that Muslims can't figure out what the ahruf are, and that this discussion is a big mess. How are Muslims not saying, wait a minute, did you guys just now find out about this? Or did you already know about this and you've been lying to us all along? Which one is it? Either you just found out about the Kirat and the Ahruf and the differences and the chapters that came up missing and the verses that were eaten by a sheep and all the verses that were lost because the people who had them memorized died in battle and the differences in the manuscripts and the Sanaa manuscript. Either you just found out about this stuff, you had no clue, scholars. Either you just found out about this stuff, and so you're informing us now that you just figured it out too, or you've known about this stuff before, and you were lying to us by telling us perfect preservation. Which is it? And Muslims, what we're telling you is we know which one it is. They've been lying to you. They've known about this stuff. Listen, any Muslim who's read Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim knows enough about the text of the Quran to completely destroy what you've been told. Any Muslim who's compared manuscripts of the Quran can completely destroy all this. So any scholar with a background in the Quran knows that you've been lied to. The question for you should be, why do we keep listening to these people? Instead, you just keep mindlessly believing anything they say. It's like it's almost like an abused wife or something, right? Who keeps going back to the husband that keeps beating her. And he keeps beating her and beating her and beating her, and she just keeps coming back. Oh, he loves me so much. That's how Muslims are. Oh, he keeps lying to me, but he just loves me so much with all these lies he's telling me. Yeah. What a religion, man. What a religion.
Crazy.
All right, should we watch some more of that video clip?
Sure.
All right, going back to Sheikh Yasser Qadhi.
To my lectures that I've mentioned the crises that happened to me at Yale. This was the issue. That the issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Here's the point. These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised.
So is what you're saying the shak that came, or not the shak, but the crisis that you had was in relation to this question of the relationship between the ahruf and the qira'at, basically?
No. The crisis I had wasn't that. The crisis I had was, that was what generated. But what was the crisis? The crisis was very simple. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by our people by our academics, by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. They'll bring you riwayat, and they'll bring you...
Did you catch what he was saying there, Tony?
Yeah.
That first of all, let me give a shout out to Islam Critique here. He says, I was the first to post this video because Jibreel told me the situation was going to blow up. Well, it's amazing because the situation did blow up. So this is a confirmed prophecy of Islam Critiqued, and he must be a prophet after Muhammad, and therefore Muhammad's not the final prophet, and Islam is false. What are your thoughts on the clip we just heard? There's still, I think, another minute left on the clip, but
I think that I think what he said about going to Yale is what really shook him up, and that's because when you go to an Ivy League university or a school of higher learning, it's not the old Islamic mantra, preaching to the choir, the Quran's always been preserved, etc. Western scholars look at history objectively. They look at texts objectively, and so they should. And it was there that he was pressed on these issues. Notice how he said, David, there's issues that I'm not going to bring up. One of them, I bet, was Aisha being 9 years old. And so he's openly admitting that these Western scholars, did you hear what he said? He said, they're using our books, they're using our materials. And so what has always astonished me, David, and you get this all the time too, is you will quote their own materials and they will get angry at you. They will call you a kafir. They will call you every name under the book. And yet these sources come from within Islam's most trusted sources and texts. So I think that what Qadhi is saying is, look, these Western scholars, they're not making this up. these issues are in our books, and they keep poking. I like the way he said there's no red line in academia. What is the red line in Islam? You go, and then you say, "Oh, Allah knows best. We're not gonna question further." Christians aren't like that, David. If you notice, when it comes to when I teach on textual criticism at the seminary, I really challenge my students to think, which of these variants is the original variant. Some students get a little ruffled over the fact that maybe the story of the woman caught in adultery is not part of John's gospel. Okay, so are you interested in what John wrote under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, or are you interested in what a scribe wrote several centuries later? Well, we want truth. You see, David, you and I follow the one who claimed to be the truth, the embodiment of truth itself. And so truth matters to us. Truth matters to us. And therefore, whether we're studying the Bible or whether we're studying the Quran, we want to be honest in our research. And therefore, when we look at the Quran or the Hadith, we're very careful how we quote these sources. We want to quote them in context. And so I appreciate the fact that Qadi is giving, a shout out to Western academia, because they're doing what really we've been doing for a long time. And that is just dealing with the texts, dealing with the source materials. And they do not support the Islamic claim that this Quran is simply a preserved text.
Yeah, and again, I mean, how sad is this? How sad is this situation? When you've got the Muslim apologists, and the Muslim apologists and scholars and leaders, they tell their people, perfect preservation right down to the letter, no difference anywhere in the entire history of the Quran from the time it was revealed to Muhammad. And we all go through their sources. There's some people who examine manuscripts and so on, and we just say, that's completely false. That's completely ridiculous. In other words, we say, there are holes in the narrative. There's some holes in your narrative there, right? What you guys are saying does not fit the facts. And then you've got Yasser Qadi here saying, we as Muslims, we really love the Quran, and so we push a little, but then when we're given an answer, we say, yeah, that's enough for us. And he says, as you pointed out, the Western scholars, they don't have that line, and so we give them their answer, which we think is fine, which we accepted when we saw a problem, and our Muslim leaders told us. But they don't stop. They push farther. And it was amazing because he said, and we know they're right. We know they're right because they're quoting our sources. In other words, so in order to give you an example like this, right? If Muslims are confused. What are these ahruf? I mean, the Quran's revealed in these different ahruf. What are they? And the answer that you're Muslim, so that'll be like the initial stage that he was talking about earlier, right? You hear about the Qirat and ahruf, and you say, what is this stuff going on? And once you start digging a little deeper, you'll get the answer, the ahruf are these different dialects, and it had to be in these different Arab dialects to make things easier on the early Arab community in accepting Islam, and so on. And so you say, okay, that's fine. But if you then try to say that among Western academics in this area, they're going to start they're going to show you the holes, right? They're going to say, wait a minute. Why do you have right here in your source that these two guys who spoke the same dialect and were part of the same tribe are arguing about which recitation of the Quran is correct? Why are these two? If it's a matter of dialect, why are two guys who speak the same dialect arguing about the different ahruf? So your answer doesn't make any sense. And what he's saying is, as Muslims, they go, they're right. They're right. We accepted it because we love the Quran so much. We just want an easy answer. They don't want the easy answer. They want the correct answer. So they press us, and we realize, gosh, they're quoting our sources to show us that our answer is wrong. And at the end of the day, according to Yasser Qadi, really, at the end of the day, it's one massive mess. We don't know what's going on in the history of the preservation of the Quran, and so the Muslim population just needs to be kept away from this because it will destroy your faith in the perfect preservation of the Quran that you've been lied to about.
Yeah. And there's a double standard too, right, David? Because how many years have we heard Muslims like Shabir Ali going to the Jesus seminar, quoting Robert Funk, quoting Bart Ehrman, quoting liberal scholars against the New Testament, against Jesus and so forth. And we would say, well, yeah, I mean, if they're bringing up textual issues, we can agree on, the various variants and so forth. But we need to understand that, these liberal scholars are coming from a worldview that doesn't believe in God and so forth and so on. But it's interesting, the double standards is Muslims will will not go to these scholars. They call them Orientalists, these Western scholars who study Islam. They call them Orientalists. And so they'll say, well, they're biased and they're atheists and they're anti-supernaturalists and so forth. But so is Bart Ehrman, and so is the Jesus Seminar. But it doesn't stop Muslims from going to these liberal scholars to take down the Bible. But for some reason, there's a double standard. In other words, it's okay for Islam to go to these so-called, they call them Orientalists, to dismiss them and say, well, we can't believe what they say. But we're definitely going to go to the liberal scholars to attack Christianity. So I don't have a problem with, if Bart Ehrman wants to talk about the text of the New Testament. I actually taught a course at seminary on reliability of the Bible Part 2, where we dealt with answering Bart Ehrman. On textual grounds, we can agree on certain issues of the text of the New Testament. But where Ehrman goes off, of course, is when he deals with things like philosophy. I don't know if you read his book on the problem of evil, David.
I read some of it. I read some of it. I thought it was horrible.
It's terrible, absolutely horrible. And that's because he's not a philosopher. He doesn't have.
And guys, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that because he's an agnostic and an unbeliever. There are brilliant works dealing with the problem. Hume, I disagree with David Hume. Hume's dialogues concerning natural religion would be on my top 5 most awesome books in the history of philosophy. And he's kind of deist and so on, but certainly a non-Christian who's challenging claims of Christians and theists and so on. But brilliant work. But anytime Ehrman steps out of his field at all, it's just a disaster.
Right.
And on that issue of double standards, it reminded me of Shabir, because Shabir's been kind of the king of this for years, right? I mean, no one goes to liberal and atheist scholars as much as Shabir, and yet never occurred to him for years at least. I think he may be impacted more recently, but for years never occurred to him to apply these same standards to the Quran and the Muslim sources. Right. But even as recently as a debate we had a couple years ago on the resurrection of Jesus, I was pointing out that there's a German Muslim scholar, Mohammed Sven Kalish, who apostatized because he concluded that Muhammad probably never existed.
That's right.
Now, I disagreed with his conclusion there, but how he came to that conclusion was very interesting. He says, "Hey, we Muslims, we apply these certain standards to the Bible, and we attack the Bible. What happens if I apply the same standards we use against the Bible? What happens if I apply those standards to our Muslim sources?" And he concluded so he applied the same standards and concluded, I can't even say Muhammad existed. Right? So that's what happened when he tried to be consistent. Anyway, I pointed this out to Shabir, and Shabir's position was, well, if people are coming along, if they're that radically skeptical and they say people didn't exist and stuff, you just can't take them seriously. And then later in the debate, I forgot to point it out. I noticed it as soon as he said it, but I forgot to point it out because I was focusing on something else. But later in the debate, to make one of his points, he quotes Robert Price, who doesn't believe that Jesus existed, right?
That's right.
And so it's just complete, utter hypocrisy every step of the way.
Yeah.
And it's just, wow, it's amazing. But
I mean, even with Bart Ehrman, David, Bart Ehrman, one of his books was Did Jesus Exist? And Ehrman vehemently defends the historicity of Jesus, unlike Kalish, who applied. And that's because, David, the evidence we have for the historical Jesus is much greater than the historical evidence we have for Muhammad. Yeah. I mean, his biography is 150 years later with Ibn Ishaq, and then Ibn Hisham had to heavily edit that another century later. So, yeah, the biographical information for Jesus is much greater than that of Muhammad.
Yes, and so now to go back to what Tony was just saying, there's this situation where you've got Sheikh Yasser Qadhi admitting that, hey, even Muslim scholars, we try to accept answers and we accept answers a little too quickly and easily, and if we're pushed on them by Western academics, we realize they're right. They're right. Mm-hmm. And so here he is saying these other guys who don't respect the Quran, who don't accept the easy answers, are actually right according to our Muslim sources. That's what he's saying. Yeah. So our answers are wrong according to our own Muslim sources. He tells Muslims that, but the entire time he's saying, but I can't tell you anything about what I'm talking about right now. I can tell you that you guys believe things that are wrong. There's holes in the narrative that you believe that you got from us, and that Western academics are the ones who are destroying this narrative, and they're right, but I can't tell you anything about what's going on here because it will because you'll leave Islam, and I don't want to do that to you. Amazing.
And this is
stuff.
a textual issue, David. This is a textual issue we're talking. We're talking about text. We're not talking about the theology of Islam. We're talking about the textual criticism of the Quran. And so, like I said, we're not afraid of the textual critics. We've withstood them for 400 years, and the Bible is still the world's bestseller. So the issue here is not an attack on Islamic theology. It is a question about the integrity of the text of the Quran, whether or not it is what Muslims claim it is.
All right, let's go ahead and watch the last minute of that video. Oh, by the way, I left this up here by Islam Critiqued. Everyone, if you're not subscribed to Islam Critiqued, there are lots of apologists who come at the issue of perfect preservation from kind of a different angle. There are people who are kind of manuscript based. They're talking about, the different manuscripts and the different versions of it. So Hatun Tash and Jay Smith, they focus a lot on different versions of the Quran in the world today and differences in the manuscript tradition. I'm what you might call source based, meaning I'm just quoting Muslim. All I do is quote Muslim sources. All right, I quote Muslim sources about chapters coming up missing and passages being lost and verses being eaten by a sheep and stuff like that. I just quote their sources. But Islam Critiqued is taking things to a new level as far as YouTubers, in that he's really going deep into the history of the Quran and where different things came from and where Muhammad's getting these stories from and so on. And so he's going through the text and he's putting that information into video form. A lot of information in his videos you're not going to find on my channel or the other channels. And so you want to subscribe to that to get the relevant information. Yeah,
I want to highly endorse Colin's work as well on Islam Critique. I think it's superb work. So I like to endorse that as well.
And all right, let's go ahead and watch this last minute or so of Qadi's points.
And then you add to that very well-known issues of, I don't even want to be explicit. And then you bring on top of that makhtutat, and then. And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. These are now well known within the Western Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, 100 years ago. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream. And by and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not answering those questions in a manner that it needs to be. The Western Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, 100 years ago. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream. And by and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not answering those questions in a manner that it needs to be answered.
I played the end there twice. He said that the Western academics, their knowledge has increased massively of the Muslim sources. And he said that the problems they are pointing out, the problems they are drawing attention to, are now becoming mainstream. Meaning more and more people are finding out about it. And he said that the Muslims outside of that, they have no idea. And the answers that they would give do not make any sense and do not answer those issues. Muslims, think about what this guy is saying here. He's saying these Western academics know all sorts of problems with our narrative, in which there are massive holes. There are holes in our narrative. They know it. They know about all these problems, and the answers that we're taught, that we teach to Muslims in the Muslim world, can't possibly deal with those kinds of issues. And he's already said they're right. These dudes are right. So what's he saying then? He's saying Muslims are wrong. These guys are right. The answers that you Muslims think are real answers could never answer these issues, and their knowledge continues to grow. Their knowledge continues to grow, and the problems that they are pointing out are becoming mainstream Tony, can you imagine what a Western academic who studies the Quran must think when he looks and he sees 1.6 billion Muslims who have been completely lied to about the history of the Quran? And he's looking, they're all going, perfect preservation right down to the letter. And he's going, what are you talking about here? What are you talking about? How do your leaders tell you that? He must be absolutely disgusted with the way Muslim apologists and Muslim scholars treat these Muslims, keeping them in a state of ignorance and deception and delusion. And here you have Sheikh Qadi telling them that's what the situation is. You guys are in a state of ignorance, deception, and delusion. It's Western academics who have it right, and I cannot tell you what they got right because it would destroy your faith if I did.
Right.
And so I have to tell you, you're all wrong. There are holes in the narrative. Yeah. They're right. We're wrong. And I'm not going to tell you anything beyond that. My goodness, what a gift. Yeah. What a gift we have in Yasir Qadi.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah. And David, I was also thinking that, I mean, if you read other Orientalists, as they're called, I mean, people like Gabriel Reynolds and Francois de Roche, and you read people of that caliber, Robert Powers and so forth, it's very clear that what these scholars are saying is exactly what Qadi has just admitted. But they're getting it from the Islamic sources. Again, they're not. It's not like they discovered plutonium here. They're simply going to Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. They're going to Sunan Abu Dawud. They're going to Ibn Ishaq, the Sirah. They're getting all this from the literature. And I mean, yeah, their knowledge has increased. But I think way back in the 1930s, Arthur Jeffrey knew about this already at Columbia University. He was familiar with this. But I think what he means by the knowledge has increased is, David, the internet has sealed the doom of the Islamic myths. And so more and more people now can access the hadith online, the Sirah, and of course, they can check out the sources for themselves.
And really, that's obviously what's behind Shabir Ali and Yasir Qadi coming out and acknowledging some of these things, right? Notice what he's saying. He's saying the problems that are being pointed out in the West are becoming mainstream, meaning they're becoming easier and easier to find. More and more people are becoming aware of these facts, and the Muslims are still in a state of ignorance. They think that they've got answers, and it's complete delusional, false nonsense, right? And so he's noticing that, and he's realizing, wait a minute, if their knowledge and the spread of that knowledge is increasing, we can't continue to just be in a state of ignorance. Pretty soon, it's going to be everywhere. Everyone's going to hear this, and the entire Muslim confidence in the Quran, this false narrative that they've been given, is just going to collapse all at once. So we kind of need to ease Muslims into this. We need to start giving them hints. Guys, there's some problems here. Oh, but it's still the Word of God. It's still the perfect Word of God. But the narrative we've given you is just, is wrong. He's trying to ease them into that. Yeah. And then he gets a backlash. And then we got to delete the footage. And so I think Yasser's concluding right now, Muslims are not ready for this. Yeah, I gave them a little glimpse that they are not ready for it, and that's why he's backtracking. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and put that. Let me go ahead and put that up. So this is Sheikh Yasir Qadi actually pulling. He's pulling the Islamophobia card because we all pointed out everything he admitted. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen. So, all of us said the same thing when he admitted all these things. We said, wow, we've got a lot of respect for Yasir Qadi for being willing to say that to all the Muslims who are watching and so on. And then there was this backlash because we all jumped on it. And we all said, look at what he said. 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 And then there's this crisis of faith in the Muslim community, and everyone's pointing a finger at Yasir Qadi, and then Hijab deletes the footage and everything to cover it up, try and cover up the mess, and then more people start going into it. And so what's going to happen here is Yasir Qadi all he had to do was stand his ground, and we would have had he would have been my guy. I would have liked him as much as James White likes him, right? I'd have been like, anyone who can stand his ground with 1.6 billion Muslims saying, you're destroying our faith by telling us the truth. Anyone that could stand his ground and say, well, look, I'm going to speak the truth to you no matter what, even if it hurts you, right? If he could have done that, I'd have been a Yasir Qadi fan for life. But what did he do? Nope, backlash, and here's how he broke it. Here's how he broke. Yasir Qadi says, after a recent interview with brother Muhammad Hijab, some missionaries and anti-Muslim propagandists. That's us. That's Islam Critiqued. That's Jay Smith, Hatun Taj, Al Fadi, and so on. Everyone who shared this info. So I guess we would be missionaries, and anti-Muslim propagandists would be like Abdullah Samir, since he's not a missionary. So some missionaries and anti-Muslim propagandists have read their own prejudices into our very brief discussion. Some of them have twisted my words to suit their agenda, while Muslim scholarship has pioneered Quranic studies for centuries. Pioneered? He's the one saying that it's completely out of touch with reality and that Western scholars have to come and inform them of the truth. While Muslim scholarship has pioneered Quranic studies for centuries and continues to do so, the fact remains that we all agree on the demonstrably proven fact that the Quran has been preserved in its entirety, word for word. I'm surprised he didn't say letter for letter and dot for dot.
Yeah.
Word for word, and that we believe that all of the 10 recitations, Qira'at, of the Quran are revealed from Allah. To see such Islamophobes try to read in an argument that no one amongst us ever made in order to prove their incorrect narrative is only demonstrating the unethical tactics they resort to. Oh my goodness, these Islamophobes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very Christophobic of him to say that, you know, David. Because I think Qadi is being a Christophobe, attacking Christians there as well. But he's backpedaling. I mean, this is basically putting the film on reverse and watching them go backwards. He's backpedaling, and I think this is just major damage control right now.
Oh, it's massive, massive damage control. Let's take a couple more comments. I think we'll go on to try and watch some of Shabir's video to since we got a little 45 minutes or so left. But Nim Grace here, I'm a little confused here. Nim Grace says, if we focus on the perfect preservation argument, Muslims might think that we think that the Quran content is great. The content is not great. Please address it. I've never heard that response, Nim Grace. Muslims are claiming as a miracle of Islam that their book has been perfectly preserved. It's one of the most widespread myths that Muslims have been taught. It's one of the biggest lies that Muslims have been taught. And it's one of the easiest lies to expose, right? Because you can just go to their sources and show them that their Quran has been changed over and over again, and to show them that there are holes in the narrative. I've never heard of a Muslim saying, oh, you're refuting our lie about the preservation of the Quran. You must really think that the content of the Quran is great. It doesn't doesn't make any sense. Well, you actually have you have some people suggesting that that Yasser Qadhi's actually worried that someone will kill him, right? So,
well, if you deny the revelations of Allah, then you're a kafir, and therefore, if you deny the books, one of the pillars of Islam is to believe in the books of Allah, and if you deny the books, then you're a kafir. So, yeah, I would understand why where Dr. Qadhi would be concerned for his safety there.
Yeah. So Linda Clark says he is afraid he will be killed. Ellie says, wonder how many threats he got after that interview. So I hadn't even been thinking of that. I was just thinking it was a massive embarrassment, and that probably a bunch of Muslims contacted him and said, hey, my main reason for believing Islam is I believe perfect preservation. You just destroyed that. And I think he's trying to comfort them. He probably heard from a bunch of Muslim apologists who are trying to do damage control. Because notice Muslim apologists just started posting videos left and right. Nope, it has been perfectly preserved. It has been total nonsense. But everyone's trying to do damage control. And so I was assuming that a bunch of people just went to him and said, look, man, you got to do something. That people aren't ready for this. And then he backtracked. And then he was willing.
It's a retraction, David. It's a retraction. That's what it is. He's retracting.
And where'd that comment go? There's one comment I wanted to put up. Oh, there we go. AKR said, too late, Yasser Qadhi. The reason I'm laughing is because AKR put up too late, Yasser Qadhi. But in my mind, when he was backtracking, I was thinking of the song, but it's too late, baby, now it's too late. Though we really did try to make it. Or in his case would be, though we really did try to fake it. Right?
Fake it.
Oh, man. Hey, anyone who can sing out there, please make a parody song. But it's too late, Yasser, now it's too late. Though you really did try to fake it. Too late. Too late. Oh, let me get down to one more comment. Let's see. Where did it go? What did that? Okay, so Madeline here. Madeline says, so what happens now? Will millions or thousands leave Islam now? My view, Madeline, is no, but it's huge in that it takes a while. And I've just had experiences with individual Muslims, right? You go up to an individual Muslim and he's been taught all his life that Muhammad's the greatest man who ever lived. The Quran's been perfectly preserved. The Quran is filled with scientifically miraculous statements and so on. They've been taught all these things. You can go up and give a great knockdown refutation of one of those points or one of those arguments. The Muslim still believes in Islam. Why? Because the Muslim's got a bunch of false information, right? You just dealt with a little part of it. So on balance, you may have taken away a little bit of confidence or something like that. But the Muslim still thinks he or she has tons of evidence for Islam. What Yasser Qadi and Shabir Ali are doing is they are helping us massively in one of the most important areas. So Muslims may still believe that the Quran contains miraculous scientific insights and that Muhammad is the greatest man who ever lived. They still may believe all those things. But a portion of their confidence that they have in Islam is grounded in this belief that there's been this miraculous preservation of the Quran. So if they find out there are all these different Qurans and they don't know what they're talking about when they talk about the history of the text of the Quran, if they find that out, you've just shattered a very important piece of their confidence in Islam. And so we're relentless, we're methodical, and we just keep pushing, right? We know it takes time. This is why a Muslim who converts, it usually takes a period of years, right? Because you have to deal with the lies that have been put into this person all his life. And so it can take a long time to go through all that. But guess what? We're going to keep doing it. And so basically what we're saying is, they just helped us along massively because we've been trying to do that by showing Muslims their sources, showing Muslims what's in their manuscripts. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Shabir Ali and Yasser Qadi, same basic time frame, post videos that are admitting a lot of what we've been saying for years. And so obviously we want to do this. So are there going to be millions of Muslims leaving Islam tomorrow? No, but there are going to be millions of Muslims leaving Islam 5 and 10 years from now because we're going to keep hammering with this, and we're going to keep hammering on all the other issues. What do you think about how all this plays out?
I agree. I agree with you too, David. And if you remember the story of why Bart Ehrman became an apostate, I mean, he said he was raised a Christian and so forth, but he was taught something very similar, that the Bible there's no changes, no variants in the Bible and so forth. So, when he went to Princeton and he heard that there was a variant somewhere in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2. In fact, it wasn't even a variant. It was about who was the high priest. Was it Abiathar or Ahimelech? I'm surprised that one really affected him because that's such an easy one to explain. Mm-hmm. But besides, because he thought, wow, there's these variants in the Bible, he just felt that his whole Christian faith was dashed. And that is not his fault necessarily. That was the fault of where he came from and the fact that he wasn't told about these things. But I think you're right, David. I think that eventually, like I said, it's like the cracks in a foundation. Mm-hmm. Over time, those cracks, just like a windshield, those cracks begin to, if you don't get it changed, those cracks are going to keep getting bigger and wider, and eventually it's going to crash. So I think you're right, David. It's a domino effect.
Mm-hmm. 1 second. Possible problem has been pointed out in Acts 17 land. No, I don't see that anywhere. Anyway, no, I was looking at someone in the super chat said the video description said this is going live tomorrow at 8:00 p.m. But I couldn't find anything in the description that did give a day. So, yeah, and everyone's on here fine. So, you got to know what that's talking about. All right, so. Matter of fact, let's read since I'm on the super chat page, let's read a couple super chats. Rochelle Judd posted a super chat but didn't leave a comment. A fresh coat of paints posted a super sticker called Game Over. That's good. Game Over. That's did you ever see the movie Aliens when you were younger, Tony?
Yep, I did.
There was what's his name, Bill Paxton, but it's cool. What the background of the movie was, it was improv. He was improving when they found out that no one's coming to save them and stuff, and he just starts going, "Game over, man, game over." But he was improving, so I always liked that line and stuff. So game over. Robert Wilson said, "Love you, Tony. God bless. Shout out from a fellow Torontonian." Is that what you guys are called, Torontonians?
Awesome. Yeah, we're called Torontonians. Awesome.
And he said, "Thank God we can go back to church again." The church is open up there?
Yeah, so they're beginning to open up in Canada. Well, at least in Toronto and the cities, around cities.
Edward said, Western woke politicians will do a better job of putting up a defense of Islam than Muslim apologists. Yeah, I mean, gosh. I mean, just recently, you had Mensch, who, that was one of the traditional guys on the Answering Islam website, and he was telling me, it's completely stupid and idiotic to think that Muhammad could die from poison years after the Battle of Khaybar, when it's Muhammad the one who said it. Muhammad's the one who said it. Yeah. And so you've got him, now you've got Shabir and Yasser Qadi, and then Yasser Qadi admitting all these things, and then backtracking, and Muhammad Hijab deleting the footage to try and cover up, but it just draws more attention to it. It's like the Three Stooges are doing. It's like the Three Stooges doing Islamic apologetics. Wow. Fun times. Linda Clark says, "The Holy Spirit in me grieves for our lost Muslims. May they have a crisis of religion and find the true God." That's how I actually think, because, I see in the comments there are people who are like angry at Muslims. And, when it's ISIS or something like that, or a terrorist, I get that. But as far as how I look at Muslims in general, I look at them like people almost like borderline, like people who've been kidnapped. And that's why I don't view them as these bad people who are trying to do bad things. I view them as like victims of an ideology that's been, kind of forced into them. What are your views on this?
Exactly the same as yours, David. I mean, like I've said this before, but I heard from an old pastor years and years ago said, Islam for me stands for I sincerely love all Muslims. And I do. I truly do. I love my Muslim friends. I don't like the ideology. The Bible says, hate that which is evil, love that which is good. And so I don't like an ideology that holds people captive, that enslaves people, whether it's Marxism or whether it's socialism, whatever it may be. I detest ideologies that restrict your freedom of speech, your freedom to think, and so forth. And so the Muslim is an image bearer of God. When I see a Muslim, I see someone made in the image of God. And I see someone who the Lord can touch, and the Lord could, like he did with Saul of Tarsus, the Apostle Paul, he could change his life or her life. And so my view of things is they are our brothers and sisters in Adam, not in Christ, but in Adam. And we want to see them become brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus. So absolutely. Muslims are human beings. They have parents, they have children, they have feelings like you and I, but they have a worldview that needs to be challenged and, by God's help, shattered so that they can come to know him who is the truth.
Amen. So everyone out there, if you really, it's probably easier for me to not, have a lot of ill will towards your average Muslim than for most people. I've had such a messed up past that I'm always looking at someone, sometimes even terrorists, and I'm thinking, he's still not as bad as I was, right? So who am I? Who am I to, hate him, right? So, DJM says, wow, Muslims are admitting that there are holes and problems. It appears that submission leads to ignorance and not answering questions. Muslims need to start asking questions. And DJM, you are totally right about that. And it's actually a connection here. So Islam means submission, but part of the submission is in Surah 4, verse 65 of the Quran, where Allah declares that if you have any doubt about anything Muhammad has decided, you're not a real Muslim.
That's right. So
if you can imagine the psychological pressure that puts on you, if you doubt anything, if you say, Muhammad decided that you can have sex with a 9-year-old girl, I just have a problem with that. You're not a real Muslim, according to that. So you just have to block any sort of doubts or questions like this. And man.
And Surah 33 as well, right, David? Surah 33.
Absolutely.
When Allah and his messenger have determined a matter, it is not for any believer, man or woman, to have any opinion or any say in that matter. So think about it. The God of Islam is telling you, you cannot question me or my prophet or my messenger Muhammad. Mm-hmm. You cannot question once we decide on something. And yet, what do we find in the Bible? Isaiah 1:18, come, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like crimson, they shall be white as wool. God talks with Job. He doesn't batter Job and say, how dare you question me? He simply says, do you know who you are in relation to me? Jesus did not berate his disciples for asking questions, and Jesus himself would engage people with questions, and he would get them to think, and then when they didn't know, he would end up teaching them. So our God is not afraid. He can take it. He's got a big chin. He can take it on the chin. If a God is afraid to be questioned, or a prophet, or like with Islam, as you know, David, if you question Muhammad, you can even be killed for even mocking him or questioning him. Jesus, the difference between Jesus and Muhammad is basically this. Jesus set his face to go into Jerusalem, knowing what would befall him. He went into Jerusalem, knowing what would befall him. When Muhammad was attacked by his enemies, what did he do? He ran from them. That's the hijrah. The hijrah is the departure, the flight, the immigration of Muhammad to Medina. So our God is not afraid to ask questions. And that's why Christianity really is the mother of science and the mother of philosophy. I mean, one of the greatest philosophers were Christians, but that's because we can think outside the box, because our God allows us to think, and he says, come, let's ask questions, let's talk it over.
Yeah, you have these brief flourishings of some level of science and some level of philosophy and so on in the Muslim world, and they Islam moves into a new area where they encounter a lot of new books, and it flourishes for a little while, and then Islam suffocates it. Right? It happened with science. It happened with philosophy.
And it's always when they come into contact, David, with Jews and Christians. In other words, when they invade certain civilizations, and they learn. I personally think they learned this from Jews and Christians. So think of Al-Ghazali, for example. He learned what he knew mainly from Aristotle, from the philosophy of Aristotle.
Couple more comments. Liger System says, Islam is a religion with a God with no name. That's false, Liger System. He has 99. He has 90.
So does his prophet.
He has 99.
His prophet has 99 names. Yeah.
Abraham says, God bless our Muslim brothers and guide their path. Thanks for your work, David. DJM said, why are there difficult issues? So he's referring to the comments of Yasser Qadi. He says, why are there difficult issues? Shouldn't the Quran be clear? Why should ahruf and kirat be an issue? And that's the main... Look, there are two possibilities, right? Either that's the history of your book, and the history of your book is a little confusing, and you got some unanswered questions, and it hasn't been perfectly preserved, and so on. And if Muslims had come up to us and said, "This is the history of our book. We have some unanswered questions. We have some difficult issues that we don't know, and we have some different Qurans. But basically, this is what goes back to Muhammad." I'd be fine. I would challenge their religion on other grounds. But they can never just do that, right? It always has to be, Quran's been perfectly preserved and miraculously right down to the letter from the time it was revealed to Muhammad. It's absolute nonsense, right? And it's like, why do you always have to say something completely false in defense of your religion? Why can't? And you can only assume it's because the truth wouldn't be very convincing, so you have to lie in favor of it. Wow, what a religion.
Yeah.
Hug Lover said, isn't it damnable to burn God's word? Not in Islam. In Islam, that is one of the accepted ways of disposing of Quranic materials, and a large part of that is because Uthman set the example that if you're destroying Qurans for some reason, so if it becomes old and tattered and stuff like that, that is one of the ways of disposing of Qurans. Christy Robinson with the super sticker. DJM says, Allah is able to do all things, but he could not give Muhammad literacy nor reveal the Quran to all of humanity. Relying on transcribers gave rise to variants. On that issue of literacy. Now, to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, there's no problem. Tons of people down through history have been illiterate, and some of the most brilliant people down through history have been illiterate. Apparently, Homer, who composed the Iliad and the Odyssey, he could recite them, but he was apparently illiterate and so on. So it's not about being smart or something, but when you make the key figure of your religion, just because, Tony was bringing up philosophy and science, when the key figure of your religion is praised for his illiteracy and coming up, producing these revelations, even though he's illiterate, unlettered, and that's the key figure of your religion. Do you think that plays any sort of role too, or is it just because Muslims are taught not to question certain things?
Are you asking me, David?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that the claim of Muhammad's illiteracy is just another way to enhance the Quran, to say that he could not have possibly have written the Quran and its so-called beauty and prose and so forth. The same claim Mormons make for Joseph Smith, that he was illiterate. How could he have written the Book of Mormon and so forth? But as you know, David, the same Western scholars that Qadi says is pressing Muslims to the wall, a lot of them have even questioned the whole illiteracy of Muhammad. How can a caravan trader who is engaged in transactions and trade and so forth, how could he not know at least some basic elementary writing skills or even mathematics? In fact, before he died, some of the traditions say Muhammad called for he wanted to write something down. And then he wasn't able to write it due to weakness and so forth. And then when he signed the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, he wrote Ibn Abdullah, the son of Abdullah, and so forth. So, and the key text is Surah 7:157, right? The unlettered prophet, the Al-Umi.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. There are questions of what that actually even means,
correct.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could mean. I mean, some translations say the unlettered, but it's also the word that means a Gentile prophet. It can refer to a prophet who's not from the chosen seed of prophethood, which is Israel, the Jews who come from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes, and so forth. And so what it's saying is Muhammad is a Gentile prophet, not a Jewish prophet in the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes. And so there are scholars who've called this into question, like Robert Powers and others. But usually this is done, David, what I have found is it's usually done to enhance the Quran, to say, you see, the Quran must be from God, because how could an illiterate man like Muhammad write the Quran down and so forth and so on, which is really a pathetic excuse. As you pointed out, that is not an argument for inspiration.
Well, I think you could put an Arabic Scrabble board into a blender and come up with something better than the Quran.
Yeah.
Than the Quran.
Yeah.
But what you might say is, as LD puts here, there are holes in the narrative.
Yes.
Right. So you got the Muslim story about Muhammad coming up with these revelations, and it's impossible because he was illiterate. Even for that, there are holes in the narrative, ladies and gentlemen. Crypto Pirate says Tony looks like a tough guy, so there's really no way he can be Canadian. Lol.
No, I'm not a tough guy. Well, I was. Well, growing up, I was a bully apparently, but no, I'm not a tough guy. Not at all.
Peter Millick says, do you think either one of you could rock an Orthodox priest beard? Also, what would Muhammad think of a certain character, Jeff Dunham character, Ahmed? So he's referring to Ahmed, the dead terrorist. But Jeff Dunham, in order to protect himself, I think he's declared that Ahmed, the dead terrorist, is actually a Buddhist. I think he said that in one of his shows, that he made it a Buddhist or something like that in order to avoid any difficulties there. But he asked if you could rock an Orthodox priest beard. I don't think so. Mine doesn't grow properly.
Yeah, I mean, I've had in some of our series together, David, my beard was pretty long. The only problem is my wife keeps telling me, you're beginning to look more and more like Al Qaeda members, or ISIS, and so she was telling me, I think it's time to trim it back or get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm a dude who I would like to have one of those, long, cool beards that come down to here.
ZZ tops?
Yeah, something like that. Not that long, but, like down to here. But my beard kind of grows out like this. Like you can look at some of my videos where I was letting it grow. It kind of grows straight out to where I get it's almost like a fro, but down on on my chin, right? It just grows straight out like that. It's pretty, yeah, it doesn't look good. I don't look cool. I don't look cool with it. So, and then a couple more real quick. Chad Parsons said, doesn't the concept of abrogation create variance? Kind of, not quite in the same sense as textual variance, but Yeah, you can have a variant. So, for instance, a lot of the things that Ubay ibn Ka'b had in his version of the Quran were things that other Muslims said were abrogated. But guess what? In the Quran, Muslims have today, they're supposedly abrogated verses. So, so Muhammad would abrogate verses or even parts of verses, but Ubay would keep the original that he memorized, right? So yes, that can actually create textual variance and would have been a source for a lot of the. In fact, in Sahih al-Bukhari, Umar, the second of the rightly guided caliphs, one of Muhammad's closest companions and Muhammad's father-in-law, since Muhammad married his daughter, Umar said, Ubay is the best reciter among us, but we have to leave off some of what he recites. And Ubay responds, what are you talking about? I got it from the mouth of Muhammad. I'm not leaving it for anything whatsoever. And so, yes, that is a source of variance. And then S. Gravois says, thanks for all you do. And LD left a super chat without a comment. All right, I think they've been a couple super chats since we were doing there. Tony, we're already at 9:38, so I don't think we could actually go into the Shabir footage, but we got a lot of other cool stuff along the way. How about we just take some?
Sure.
How about we just take questions for another 15 minutes or so?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Do you, are you able to see the comments on?
No, not on my screen.
Okay,
no.
so I will find them for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question about anything we've been discussing right now, all right. So here's one from Daniel. Daniel says, I have heard from some Muslim scholars, they said that there is some hadith about Aisha said that she was born 4 years before Muhammad's first revelation. What is your response? So the idea here is if Aisha was born 4 years before Muhammad's first revelation, and if Muhammad's first revelation was in the year 610, then that would put Aisha, then you would have Aisha born in the year 606, and if Aisha was born in 606 and then Muhammad marries her, you're talking in the early 620s, then you might get a different age for her. Daniel, do something fun. Whenever someone says she was born 4 years before Muhammad's first revelation, say book, chapter, and number.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Sahih al-Bukhari, which book? There's 9 volumes. Which book? Which number? I want to see it. Just get in that habit, right? Because a lot of times what you'll see is the argument will be based on something like, well, Aisha's sister was born, she was born certain number of years after, and then we have another source which says that her sister died when she was 100, and then, she was born at such and such year, and they'll put all these long chain of numbers together in order to come up with, so Aisha must have been born then, and they'll ignore 50 passages saying that she was born, that she was 9 years old when Muhammad had sex with her, right? So the problem is all of the sources people go to try to compile these numbers and so on, the exact same sources all say she was 9 years old. So if you're trusting these sources to compile that, and notice you could, if you adopt that message, you could do almost everything because you have all kinds of inconsistencies in the Muslim sources, right? You'll have some that would put the you'd have some if you use the numbering, you'd say, okay, the flight to Medina was 10 years after Muhammad received his revelation. Well, the flight is in 622, so that would put Muhammad's first revelation in 612. You have another revelation that says it was 12 years after, and so that would put it at 610. So you could mess with the numbers if you're doing that. And if you put 5 or 6 numbers together, well, this and this, and then this, and then this happened then, and then this had this, you could make pretty much anything you want happen in Islam. And none of this would cover up the fact that all the sources they're quoting say she was 9 years old. And so it's pretty disastrous and pretty sad. And what does Yasser Qadi call them when they try to argue that Aisha was older? He calls them liars. He calls them liars. Quit lying. Oh, hang on. I haven't watched this yet, but I think I saw the title at some point. But Atem Yak says there's a video on YouTube called Yasser Qadi Refutes Yasser Qadi. let's see. Oh, did you watch? Did you see Hatun's video that she posted earlier?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I'm saying it because this is a question from Shaynabi. Shaynabi says Yasser Qadi said somewhere in the interview that there's a hadith that says Muhammad placed his hand on a Muslim's heart who doubted, and his doubt went away. Can you talk about this?
That was Ubay bin Ka'b. When Yasser Qadi was doing his interview with Muhammad Hijab, he actually Muhammad Hijab brought that up about Ubay bin Ka'b expressing doubt, and then Muhammad placed his hand on his chest, and the doubt went away. So that's in the interview. So if you go to Islam Critiqued and watch the entire video, you'll notice he makes reference to it there. Yeah.
And so, I wanted to, can someone post in the comments for Shaynabi here? Can someone post in the comments the link to Hatun's video? Hatun posted a video on this earlier today where she went to some of the parallel sources, because the one that's in the story, Ubay learns about the different ahruf because he sees two people are quoting a Quran verse in different ways. And then Muhammad said, yep, they're both fine. And Ubay says, I had a doubt that I haven't had since the time of ignorance, since the pre-Islamic time.
Al-Jahiliyyah.
Yeah. And so Muhammad supposedly cast Satan out of his heart and so on. And so anyway, that's the story here. And Yasser Qadi basically brings us up to say, look, this is Ubay bin Ka'b. He's the master of the Quran. He's called the master of the Quran. And so this is the go-to guy. Again, Umar said, Ubay was the best reciter among us. So this is the man. And even the man himself had doubts when he started to learn about the ahruf. That's what Yasser Qadi was saying. And that's how he used it as an example. He's saying, if the best of the best of the best started having doubts when he learned about the ahruf, what do you think about the rest of us? We're not even in the presence of Muhammad anymore. What do you think? Do you think about the rest of us? So that's how he used it. But yes, you have this story. But go to Hatun's video, and if you go into Hatun's video, she actually goes through some of the parallel sources, because the same story, you have a similar story in Sahih Muslim and a couple other sources, but some of them are kind of different. Like in one of them, Muhammad just hits him in his chest, and that supposedly brings him back to reality or something like that. So yeah, check that out. Let's find some more comments here. Here's a question for you, Tony. Bosnian Prophet says, David, why would Jesus give life to someone like Muhammad who will and is taking now millions to hell? So this is kind of a version of the problem of evil. Why does God give life to people like Hitler, people like Muhammad? Why not just make them all good, nice people, I guess, is the question.
Right. Well, the short answer to that is that Deuteronomy 29:29, we're told the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things that are known to us are revealed. In other words, this gets into the whole question of God's secret counsel, God's wise counsel, and the counsel of the triune God and so forth, which he decreed from the foundation of the world. This gets into really heavy theology, but the short answer is we don't fully know. That's the short answer. God also gave life to Satan, that is the heavenly being that rebelled against him. Why would God give life to a heavenly being or create a heavenly being that would bring about temptation and bring about disaster and bring about rebellion in the world and so forth and so on? We don't fully know, other than to say that Scripture says that God does all things according to the counsel of his will, to the praise of his eternal glory, and that God creates things to demonstrate. Basically, the Scripture is a storyline. God shows his justice against the wicked. He demonstrates that if God were to be merciful to all, then he would not show his justice. If God were to be just to all, he would damn us all to hell and show no mercy. And so these are questions that go back to the mind of the triune God. why God did what he did. God created the world in such a way that he would bring about his glory, and that's where all history is heading. It heads to the time when every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And so did God know that Adam and Eve would fall in the Garden of Eden? Yes, he would have had to know. There is no way God would not have known the end from the beginning. And so these are areas where we have to step back, and that's why I quoted Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord our God. The things revealed belong to us and to our children. And so there's a sense in which God has his hidden will, his will that is inscrutable to us humans. And then what we know about God's will, God has revealed to us in Scripture. And so that is the biblical response to the problem of evil. And we know that God works through evil. We saw him do it through the brothers of Joseph. We saw God working through Pontius Pilate, Herod Antipas, and then the Jewish Sanhedrin, and then the Roman soldiers, the Gentiles. He worked through their evil machinations to bring about the death of Jesus Christ, which would bring about the atonement for the sins of the world, and it would bring about God's purpose and redemption. So did that involve evil people? Yeah. The trial of Jesus was the greatest mistrial in all of human history. The murder of the Son of God, which was an evil thing that we did. But nonetheless, God worked through the evil intentions of men to bring about his purposes. And so at the end of the day, God created Hitler. Yes, God created Mussolini. Yes, God created Mao Zedong. But God will also demonstrate his justice in their judgment and so forth. And God's judgment is meaningless without his mercy. And at the same time, God's mercy is meaningless without his judgment. And I know that's a very loaded theological answer, but that's the only one I can give you based on what the Bible says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just say, we're given, human beings are given dominion over this
Mm-hmm.
world. And so if someone rises up with horrible teachings, leading people astray, who's supposed to deal with that? I mean, God is ultimately going to deal with things, but who's supposed to deal with that? We're supposed to go and confront that. When there are false ideologies, dangerous ideologies that are oppressing people, we're the ones who are supposed to go deal with that, right? So ladies and gentlemen, when Islam is spreading, why is it spreading? Because the church is woefully unprepared and won't equip itself and won't equip Christians to go out and stand and confront it. So it's very easy to say, sit back and sit here, and we're not doing anything. We're not responding to it. It could be easily refuted, right? If the world's 2 billion plus Christians learned even the basics. Matter of fact, if 1%. Matter of fact, if 1/10 of 1% of Christians would learn the basics about responding to Islam, I think Islam would be crumbling in the next 5 to 10 years. There would still be Muslims and stuff, but as a threat to world peace and so on, Islam would be crumbling, and we don't. And notice, instead, we'll do what? God, why'd you do this?
Yeah.
Could we do something about it? Yeah, it's like a person sitting, someone bleeding to death beside you. You can stop the bleeding. You could take a first aid kit and stop the bleeding and stuff, but you just sit there watching. Why'd you do that, God? Why'd you do that? Yeah. Why didn't you fix that? I'm sitting right here. I could obviously do something about that, but I want to. Why'd you do that? It's interesting stuff. Oh, here's another one that would be. This one would be a good question for both of us. Black Tuesday Films. How do you deal with skeptics who want to compare the violence and atrocities in Islam with the Old Testament? So how do you deal with skeptics? So talking about atheists and stuff, I guess this is, if we point out, look at Islam, it calls for violent jihad and so on. How do you deal with atheists or agnostics who say, "Oh, wait a minute, look at your Old Testament there"? How would you respond to that, Tony?
Yeah, well, first I would say, why does the atheist even care? He doesn't believe in an objective moral standard. So there really is nothing objectively wrong with genocide, because there is nothing objective about morality. But what we need to understand is that the Christian response is, look, the Bible is comprised of two testaments. We have the Old Testament, we have the New Testament. In the Old Testament, it's basically God, the land, the people. And that's what the Bible calls the covenant between God, his people, and the land. And so under the old covenant, there was the people of Israel, there was the land of promise, and so forth. And God had told the patriarchs that he would move his people into that land after 400 years of slavery in Egypt. And he pointed out that the sins of the Amorites, the Canaanites, he said, look, their sin is not yet full, but I will come and visit them. So think about this for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. God gave Jericho 400 years to repent. I mean, that's longer than the United States has been around, longer than definitely Canada has been around. And so in the Old Testament, these wars that took place under Joshua, under King Saul, for example, with the Amalekites and so forth, these were divine commands by God to take the land that God had promised to his people in the Abrahamic covenant. However, those wars, for example, they were not genocidal. That is, it doesn't mean that all the Canaanites were eliminated from the face of the earth. And if you wanted to learn more about this, read Paul Copan. He's written some really good material on this. We know that the Canaanites were not all eliminated because Jesus healed a Canaanite woman's daughter in Matthew 15 of demonic possession. And so it doesn't mean that all of them were eliminated. However, the Old Testament wars were historical. Let me underline this. They were historical. That means those wars were not to be perpetuated. They were not to continue. They were done in history for a specific purpose. God used Israel as his hand and arm of judgment against the people of Jericho. They did a lot of nasty things there. Archaeology has confirmed a lot of what we know, child sacrifice and bestiality and so forth. And so under the New Testament, you will notice Jesus does not call his church to take up arms and go out and kill the world for the gospel and so forth. He doesn't command that. And Paul tells us that our citizenship is not from this earth. Our citizenship is in heaven, from whence we await the Savior. So the Old Testament wars are historical. They're done, and they achieved a certain purpose. They were not to be repeated. Jihad, on the other hand, what does the Quran say? Jihad continues until the day of resurrection, which means jihad continues until the end. And therefore, the warfare in the Quran is ongoing. Jihad is ongoing, whereas the wars in the Bible were only for a certain point of time. And it's very clear from Jesus that we are no longer under theocracy. Israel was under a theocracy. We're not under a theocracy. We are the Church of Jesus Christ. We await the coming of the Lord, who will establish his eternal kingdom, wherein there is no death, no mourning, no crying. So it's important, folks, that we make a distinction here. Otherwise, we fall into the categorical fallacy.
Yeah, so along the same lines, Tony was just saying, I think of it in terms of final marching orders, right? So if our criticism of the Quran were simply, it contains violent passages, then yeah, you could flip that right back on us. Well, the Bible contains violent passages. That's not that's not our criticism of the Muslim sources. Number one, my chief concern in pointing out the violent passages in the Muslim sources is that the entire world, journalists, politicians, educators, entertainers, Muslim apologists, everyone says, those terrorist attacks have nothing to do with Islam. And so there, I'm quoting the sources, just say, stop lying. It obviously has something to do. It obviously has something to do with Islam. So that's one point. And the other point is, this is something that Islam is something that everyone should be paying attention to, because Islam calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world. Right? If you have an ideology with 1.6 billion adherents and it calls for your violent subjugation as soon as they're able to overpower you, you might want to take a look at that, right? Now, can you say any of that about Christianity? No. So in other words, if you take the Quran, you read the Quran from beginning to end and say, what am I ordered to do now? If you believe in that book, you are ordered to violently subjugate the world when you are able to. If you're in a position where you're not able to, you can do other things. But if you are ever in a position to take control, to take control of an area, that's what you're supposed to do. If you read the Bible from beginning to end, you read some stories about the wars of Canaan and stuff like that. But if you said, okay, what are the final marching orders here? What am I supposed to do? What are you told? What are you commanded to do? as a Christian. You're commanded to love your neighbor as yourself. You're commanded to love even your enemies. You're commanded, as far as it depends on you, to live in peace with all people. You don't get, hey, go out and violently subjugate the world. There's no concept of that in Christianity. So if a person, if a person says, hey, you guys got the same issues, it's just nonsense, and that's a very ill-informed person. Math Edges says, Tony, what are your favorite theology books?
My favorite theology books. Let me see. I like Wayne Grudem, his systematic theology. Wayne Grudem's systematic theology is quite good. My background, I'm a Reformed theologian, and so I love Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. I love Spurgeon's works. Anything by Bruce Ware, John Piper, even William Craig. William Craig is not Reformed; he's Arminian, but I love Dr. Craig's works, and so it's really a wide breadth. My library is quite wide in that area, but systematic theology is one area where I also specialize in.
What about the best of the best?
The best of the best.
Kenneth Copeland.
Yeah, he's second to Benny Hinn. No, the best of the best. Well, obviously the Bible is the best of the best, but that's a good question. I still love the classic Augustus Strong systematic theology, but I would probably put Wayne Grudem there near the top.
Yep, and let's see, one more here, and then there are a couple more super chats to go through, and then we'll close out here in a second. PRNC team says, would you consider inviting Dr. Qadi to clarify his view on the preservation of the Quran? Yeah, I don't imagine he'd accept the invitation, but you can extend the invitation to him if he wants to come on here. I'd be happy to let him talk most of the time, and I'd just be happy to ask questions, right? Like, I'd be happy to give him passages from his sources to talk about changes in the Quran. Be happy to let him clarify as far as he is willing, because we know he doesn't want to share the intricate details with Muslims. Doesn't think it's a good idea for Muslims to learn this stuff. So. But yeah, you can extend the invitation if he's at all interested. Again, I don't think he would be able to. He would want to do that, but yeah, I'd be happy having him on. All right, a couple super chats. Most recent, Tatiana says, Hijab made a new video yesterday. Did you watch it? No, I don't watch Hijab's videos. That's why, like, I can probably count on 3, maybe 4 fingers the number of Muhammad Hijab videos I've ever seen, and. Yeah, I'm going to watch the full live stream, unfortunately, because I think it's going to numb my mind. But yeah, I haven't watched it, but I am going to be watching the live stream with Yasser Qadi since I have it downloaded. Atu says, can we please do a session on Mormons? We actually did a session on Mormons maybe 2 months ago or something like that, so you can go back and check that out. Cheryl R. posted a couple versions of Game Over, so apparently it's some sort of emoji or something like that, or super sticker. That's cool, because it's a cool saying. Hug Lover says, if you can burn the Quran, then why is it so bad when we do? So, Tony, if a Muslim, there's an obvious answer to this. If a Muslim can burn the Quran and it's okay, why would they get upset when Terry Jones in Florida was burning the Quran?
Right. Or when rumors were going around that in Guantanamo Bay they were flushing a Quran down the toilet. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because you're not a Muslim. You're a kafir, and a kafir is a filthy unbeliever, and you are desecrating the holy text of the Quran, and therefore. And remember, the Quran does teach Islamic supremacy, that Muslims are superior to non-Muslims. They are the best of all peoples. And also in Surah 98, verse 6, that they are the best of peoples, whereas Jews and Christians who reject Islam and Muhammad are the vilest, the filthiest of creatures. So the short answer is it's okay for a Muslim to do it, but non-Muslims are kafir. Therefore, they are haram, they are unclean, and therefore they are desecrating the Quran.
Yeah, and it would typically be done. You would think it would be done for different motives, right? Like if Uthman is burning all the Qurans for the good of the community, right? He's burning all the Qurans to help Islam. So how are you going to complain about him doing it? He's doing it for the good of Islam, whereas someone who's doing it to make fun of the Quran would have a different motive, and so people would be more upset about that. John Mallory with a super sticker. Rochelle Judd says, first super chat to leave a donation. Love what you guys are doing. I'm trying to learn as quickly as I can. Thank you. Kokwak Liao retracted the message, so I can't read it. Sunshine Ministry says, what happened to the debate with Apostate Prophet? Yeah, well, we were setting that up, and there were a couple of Muslims who seemed to think that they were going to be off the hook if the atheists and Christian critics of Islam started going after each other. So basically, I notified the Apostate Prophet, and I said, I just want to make sure they understand perfectly clear that their prophet is still not safe no matter what we do. So we're the last date I suggested was to start on July 1st. I said I could get the video projects I'm currently working on, I can get all those wrapped up by then, and so kind of clean slate to focus on that for a little while. So yep, he may have responded. I don't have my phone on me, but he may have responded and said that beginning of July works. And all right, so let's see. Trying to think of tomorrow I'm going to be on with Sean McDowell, who did his doctoral work on the martyrdoms of the early apostles. So going to be talking to Sean McDowell about that. And then on Friday, going to have Jay Smith on, and Jay and I are actually going to go through the full deleted footage. So we're actually going to take that 30-minute section or whatever. I haven't watched it yet, so I mean, if there's important stuff in the entire 30 minutes, we'll go through that. If there's some completely irrelevant stuff in there, I might cut that out. But basically, we're going to go through the entire deleted 30 minutes and discuss that, and that'll be with Jay Smith. So Sean McDowell tomorrow, Lord willing, Jay Smith on Friday. Probably get Sam on either Wednesday or Thursday. Other than that, videos coming up tomorrow. Tony, any final thoughts or anything you'd like people to know?
Yeah, well, I think that these questions that we've raised today are very important. I think what our viewers can do is basically start talking about this amongst themselves. I would encourage you, if you're Christian believers and you're watching this, I would encourage you, talk to your pastors, especially now that churches are beginning to slowly open. Get information on Islam, learn about Islam. Learn about what Muslims believe and what Christians believe. And we have a duty to our Muslim neighbor. Jesus included our Muslim friends in the Great Commission. When he told us to go into the world to make disciples of the nations and teach them and baptize them, he included Muslims in that outreach. And so I think it's important to realize that if you have a Muslim friend, like David had Nabil, and the Lord used David to bring Nabil into his kingdom. If you know Muslim friends and neighbors and so forth, you are responsible for them. And I really need to stress this. God said in Ezekiel 3:18 that when I say to the wicked, you shall die, and you do not warn the wicked of their evil ways, I will hold their blood at your hands. So you have a responsibility to your Muslim neighbor. There is no excuse. You can't just say, go watch Dr. Wood's videos or Dr. Costa's videos. You have an obligation to your Muslim neighbor. And if that person dies, God will hold their blood at your hands. So please, please, please remember, you are your brother's keeper. You have a responsibility to them. So these are not just videos that David puts out so that we can look at the issues of the Quran and so forth. At the end of the day, this is all about seeing Muslims come to know Jesus Christ, and they need to know the truth. And Jesus said that you will know the truth. And what will it do? The truth will set you free. That's how powerful the truth is. It makes people free. And whoever the Son sets free is free indeed. So please, if you can take anything from this video session, learn to love your Muslim neighbor, share the truth with them, and pray for them that God would be merciful and draw them into salvation.
Amen. And up on the screen here, I have a comment from the worst live streamer in the world, Sam Shamoon. The guy who's totally helpless without me carrying him and answer the questions that he can't during our live streams. But he thinks he can go live after me on his channel. That would be the Shamunian channel. So anyone who, it's getting late. So any of you who have trouble falling asleep at night, they don't call him Audio Ambient for nothing, right? If you have trouble sleeping, then go over to Sam's channel. Be sure to watch him for a little while. You'll sleep like a baby. You'll sleep like a little baby. And one more super chat from Notaverse says, David, do you? She's joking. David, you avoid Hijab's vids because you're cautious of the fact that his arguments will be so amazing that you'll only end up taking Shahada. Lol, thanks for all you do, David and Tony. Yes, I'm terrified of these of the arguments, and so no, my attitude toward towards the newer generation of Muslim apologists is. I will occasionally, if I get enough requests about something, I'll occasionally respond to it. But basically, I really like the direction Muslim apologetics is going with these young, sort of more thug-like people, insulting, nasty, angry, taking over, because that just seems to reflect the real spirit of Islam. Shabir, you hang out with Shabir Ali. Shabir's like the nicest guy in the world,
yeah.
Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, wow, what a nice guy, and cool to have a discussion, and cool to have a debate with him. But at the end of the day, it's not. You read the Muslim sources, and Islam is much more aggressive and much more hostile, and so. I prefer going after the older generation mainly, right? Zakir Naik and these other guys. I prefer targeting them for a while in terms of argumentation and letting this new generation come up, become really, really popular, because I think it will be a much, much more accurate reflection of the true spirit and heart of Islam. And I want the world to see it. Wait a minute, these are the apologists? So it's not just these nice guys. These nice guys aren't the real representatives. It's these, thugs and stuff like that. Well, gosh, and they can actually silence their more traditional apologists and scholars, and make them backtrack and cower in fear. Ooh, gosh, what kind of religion is this? So anyway, that's the reasoning. So there will come a time, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but yeah, you want to let this young generation grow. So I tend to ignore them as much as possible for now. Can't ignore what's going on right now because it's so popular and is allowing us to really go after the Quran. But other than that, yeah, I tend to ignore them for a while. All right. Thanks to Tony for joining me here, and we will catch you again. We'll catch you again next time, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.